So anybody wants to type any question for Gabriel about his talk material into the chat? I got some questions. So so I've vaguely heard this before and then just receded into the 16th century. But how does the publication of the first folio address that political tension specifically about Spain?
So it's very sympathetic and sensitive, sensitively aligned with the Spanish match. Even the organization and design of the collection, the framing plays are aligned with the Spanish match. The Tempest, very formally under a former title, The Spanish Maze. It's the most Spanish of all of Shakespeare's plays. It also, I've highlighted before, that it revolves around an interfaith marriage. So that's the first play. The last play, Cymbeline, is it's a peaceful resolution with Rome. But I would even I could go even more into it about the other framing plays. Each one of the frames for the sections is symbolic as well, and aligned with the Spanish match.
Right, good, because I wanted to ask about the Tempest, but that makes sense. So one question, where can we read your work?
So I have two new articles. I have four articles, and all in the new publication that's edited by Roger Strittmatter, called The Shakespearean Enigma. In that, I have a history, pretty much a history of the last 400 years, readings of the first folio. And then I also have a book review of a new book out from an Orthodox scholar, Chris Lateris's Shakespeare's book. So I have it's a medium-sized book review. It's not small.
Okay. Here's a question. Why would progress with the Spanish marriage agreement speed up the printing of the first folio?
So I believe that the first folio was going to be a part of the festivities, the marriage festivities, and that would have been something like a gift exchange at one of the ceremonies, and so it was sped up when it was really a positive outlook, and it looked like the Infanta could in fact come to England in the summer of 1623. They decided to really ramp up the printing of the plays so that they could be ready for her arrival in July, August, where they would have a whole bunch of celebrations.
Who were the enemies of this arrangement? Wasn't the 18th Earl of Oxford imprisoned because he spoke out against it or something? And were there others?
Yes, exactly. So the 18th Earl of Oxford was put tower for the complete duration of the printing of the first folio. And after the first folio was completed, he was released. So, it's it's a delicious piece of coincidental evidence we could speculate about the 18th Earl being in the tower for that time.
All right, here's another. What do you make of the center columns of the title page for the plays? They are made up of small metal rules instead of long strips of brass.
I haven't looked into that angle for the first for the printing of that. I'm sorry. And I would have no comment, but I'd be very, very interested to read an article about that.
Conde Gondomar was possibly the only known foreign subscriber to First Folio. Both Digges and Mab knew him from their time in Spain. Why is there such a strong Spanish element to the production?
So what's very interesting about Gondomar is that he was a book collector, and he loved books, and he had a very strong relationship with King James. This was actually one common interest between the two of them, and I think that I do believe that there's something there. And there is a mysterious copy, the Gondomar copy of the first folio that apparently burnt in the 1800s. But we don't know if this is just, an anecdote that's more fantasy than reality. But the Gondomar copy, of course, who knows what would marginalia would be in a copy like that.
Maybe two more questions. How do you reconcile the dedication to the Herbert brothers, who were the principal opponents of the match? And I don't know if this is related or not. Can you say more about the two friends' participation in the first folio? But I don't know if that's Hemmings and Condell or what. The Stratford proponents tied to their presence as a key fact. So Herbert brothers and maybe Hemmings and Condell or who's ever involved.
Right. So I think that the Herbert brothers had William Herbert in particular was absolutely obsessed with the Lord Chamberlainship, with that official title and the responsibilities that will come with that. And I think that this obsession with that title had to do with the canonization of Shakespeare and it being a family project. And to ensure that the plays came out in the best way possible, uh, um, and that the politics. I think that we need to be careful that things are not always black and white. That the first folio, if it was a Protestant protest book, as I like to call that, it would have been completely designed completely differently. And the people asked to participate, they would have been, all of the main figures, other than the Herbert brothers, would have been different. And the framing plays would have been different. You would have had King John, the old King John version used, not the new one that was revised. You would have had Edward III starting the history section. It would have ended with Hamlet. It just so much you wouldn't have King James's favorite play as being one of the framing plays, the Winter's Tale as the last play in the comedy section. So there's just so many things that would be different with this book if it was a Protestant protest book.
Brilliant. I love this. All right, people, type some comments, questions in the chat. There's nothing there, so I'm monopolizing the first moment here. I am only vaguely remembering some very Italian knowledge in Othello specifically. And I think not just the identification of the Sagittary, fetch her, from the Sagittary, but also that Shakespeare, I think in the first folio, spells gondola, and English people go with the Gilbert and Sullivan gondola, but the Italian, you would hear it as gondola, and it's spelled with a U. And so it suggests that, as many Italians and others have asserted, that Shakespeare really knows his Italy. He knows nuances about different cities and their value systems, and he seems to pick up on the language too, and introducing words into English that are just not there, but in their Italian oral forms. So how does Florio fit into that process? Or even just specifically a play like Othello, which is so Italian in nature?
Well, apart from the huge knowledge that Florio had of Italian culture, Italian language, if we look at Florio's library, I made a presentation at the University of Amsterdam last year, in which I demonstrated the greatest number of Florio's works in his library were comedies, tragedies, pastoral comedies. He knew Italian theater very well. Also, I have discovered new documents about his early life, because just like Shakespeare, we know that Shakespeare has like his lost years where we don't know where he was. Florio too has lost years. There is a gap of years from when he was in Germany at 15 years old until he was 20 years old in London, where we don't know where he was, if he was in Italy or in France. Some of his scholars suggested that he probably traveled to France as well. I have discovered that Florio worked with two families of a family of Italian merchants from Verona. They were called the Clerici family, and another Vicentine merchant, Gaspare Gatti. He was one of the most famous silk merchants, both in Italy and when he arrived in London. In fact, he became famous in London because he made a huge gift to Queen Elizabeth I with the Italian silk. And I was able to uncover a document that concerned Florio and those lost years in which he was both working with this family of Italian merchants and with also a French merchant, Michael Delahoyde. In fact, when he arrived in London, he lived in the Huguenot district of London, working for this French merchant and living with this Italian family from Verona, the Clerici family. And so what he did was to, at 50 years old, he arrived in Germany to study Italian under a renowned Protestant writer, Pier Paolo Vergerio. He stayed in Germany 3 years. Then he came back to Italy, worked for 3-4 years with this Italian family of merchants, and then he arrived with them in London, stayed at the Huguenot district in London with his family, and then from that moment, he published his first work, First Fruit, at 25 years old. And in First Fruits, we see that he already was in contact with Robert Dudley, the Leicester Company, Richard Tarleton, and the nobility with whom his father, Michelangelo, was connected, because John Florio's father, Michelangelo Florio, was a translator, grammarian. He was tutor to Queen Elizabeth I, to Lady Jane Grey. So Florio also was helped in this sense, because when he arrived in London, he got in contact with that family his father was working with Robert Dudley, with whom his father worked, and they knew both Michelangelo and John Florio very well. So this is also why John Florio, the moment he arrived in London, he immediately got a great career with great aristocrats like Robert Dudley and the Leicester Company.
Can you rule out that Shakespeare, I don't know what that word means, went to Florio's work to write the plays? You know, when I was plunging myself into all the Italian connection books, the ones that insist, in one extreme, say that Shakespeare knows so much about Italy that he had to have been Italian. And at the other extreme, they want to dumb him down and say, well, he probably just like was wandering the streets and he bumped into John Florio and he said, I need like an Italian idea for this play. And both of these seem indeed extreme. But how would you answer that question?
Yeah, Florio, the fact that can you rule out that Shakespeare went to Florio's work to write the plays? For example, if you read First Fruits is Florio's first work. He writes a chapter where he describes all Italian cities. He describes Venice, he describes Padova, he describes Verona, and all the details about the city, the cultural differences about Italians in North Italy, in South Italy. So you can say, yeah, okay, so Shakespeare was inspired by Florio, or he read Florio's works. But at what extent? I mean, my opinion is that a writer writes about what he knows, not what he does not know. why Shakespeare always had to read Florio's works in order to know something, why he doesn't write about what he knows, his family, his background, the fact that Shakespeare always had to rely on Florio to do something is a mistake itself, because this is not how a writer should work, in my personal opinion.
Exactly. Someone suggests that she remembers, did Florio leave his books to the Earl of Pembroke?
Yeah.
And
I cited the library. I talked about Florio's library before, and he had about 400 books, Italian, Spanish, French books, Italian books, and he bequeathed the library to William Hebel, the Earl of Pembroke, when he wrote his testament in 1625, 1 year before his death. But for uncertain reason, the Pembroke renounced the execution. Florio wanted his books to be placed. He writes in the testament, "I would like my books to be placed at a Barnard Castle." But for some reason, Herbert renounced execution, and for certain, the Italian books went to some of the royal families, King Charles, or because they ended up at the British Library. Most of them ended up at the British Library, the Italian books, while the English, French, Spanish book were left to his wife, Rose Spicer. Maybe also, I don't know if for just for herself, or maybe because she could eventually sell them. Florio lived a successful career, but he died poor, because when Queen Anne of Denmark died, the King James, decided to cut the pensions of those who worked with his wife. So Florio was left basically without money when he got old. And possibly part of his library, when the Pembroke renounced execution, part of this library went to his wife, so she possibly could sell the books and have some money in exchange.
Okay, and there are a couple questions that sort of go together. Someone asking, is Florio only involved in editing the new plays in the first folio? But I think you implied that there seems to be some connections to the quarto editions, yes?
Yes, from this sample of 1,000 words that I analyzed, there is 60-70% of words that we find the first folio, and about 30% of words that we already find in the quarto editions. Especially Love's Labus Lost, which again does not surprise me, because I have also suggested Love's Labus Lost could be a collaboration between Florio and Shakespeare, because it's truly, there are so many sources that are connected to Florio. Giordano Bruno, the same style, the proverbs. Love's Labus Lost seems like a continuation of Florio's linguistic manuals. And I have suggested that Love's Labus Lost could be certainly a collaboration between Florio and Shakespeare. For the other quarto editions, Hamlet is the play that in the first folio there is only one edition of these unique Florio's fingerprints that we find in the first folio, but the majority of words from Hamlet comes from the quarto editions. But this is a work in progress, so I don't want to say that these are exact results, that they are 100% sure, because I only took a sample of 1,000 words. But for sure, there are Florio's fingerprints in all the plays of the first folio, those that were published for the first time, and those that were already published in the past. So I hope that in the future I could give some more detailed analysis and detailed results about how much of this contribution can be found in the plays published for the first time in the first folio, and those published during the quarto editions.
All right. Well, while I want to curse him for getting my students to write IT apostrophe S all the time, you've convinced me Florio is in the round table. He's in the club. So thank you. So we have some minutes for a question or two or three or four. Anybody want to type something? This is out of bounds, but wondered if your perspective includes anything about being the youngest daughter and daddy's little girl and that dynamic in a family, because I've got something to say about it.
Well, many people have commented that his with three daughters and two sons, one of whom is illegitimate and one of whom is illegitimate, he pretty much has Lear's family. That this is in his own family, and that Cordelia, of course, was the one who truly loved him. And I don't think so, honestly. It sounds nice and it makes a nice story, but I personally don't sign off to that. But some people do, and that's fine with me. That people can look at it that way. I don't see any evidence other than, for one thing, we really don't know anything about Bridget. And a number of people have been working to try to dig up more things about Bridget.
Middle child.
The middle child. And, I just don't have anything documentary to use as a point of departure and extrapolate from. So that Susan was the one that was getting to go visit with her father. We don't know if he visited. No, excuse me. Yes, we do know that he visited with his older daughter, Elizabeth, Countess of Derby, and he had, because of the 10 letters, he had several times that they had extensive visits. He and his second wife, Elizabeth Trentham, visited with the Countess of Derby, his daughter, and her husband, so that they were on good terms, at least through the latter part of the 1590s. And we don't know how long it lasted, because that's when we happen to have the letters that speak of these meetings. So he was getting along well, we know for sure, with daughter number 1 and daughter number 3. Actually, because when he was thinking, he was in his prospect of dying. A week before he died, he tried to turn over some of his family to Francis Norris, who was Bridget's husband, Lord Rycote. I don't remember the actual details, but it appears that he thought at that point in time, he did recognize his son-in-law from that marriage. So it would be another separate study to learn more, just to go through everything that we happen to have a documentary for the documentary record about them and see what was going on. But that's what we know.
Okay. Last bit here. Are all the Sidney Herbert women erased? And is there a sense of scandal or shame associated with the whole thing in Susan's prime?
Well, it's the scandal, and you may know that, and it's talked about. I haven't had, because I only got into this lovely book yesterday. This is the story of Mary Roth. She had a love affair with William Herbert, who was her cousin, and had 2 children as a result of this affair. And that was very scandalous. So, and she was Susan's best friend. So, make that of that what you would. In her book, the Countess of Montgomery's, the prose romance, the Countess of Montgomery's Urania, she has her affair in there. She admits it, and historians take that, and literary people, as an admission that yes, she did have this affair. It's not just some bad press out there. But so I don't know of any scandal, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was ever connected to Lady Mary Sidney, the sister of Philip Sidney. She was very devoted to her brother. She was Sir Philip Sidney, and bringing his literary works to press. And she was a very devoted wife. I know of no scandal associated with the Lady Mary Sidney, Countess of Pembroke. She's a very admirable person.
I am invited to self-advertise, which I never do. If I did, I could afford a better couch probably. But I will tell you that the Oxfordian edition of the Comedy of Errors should be coming out any time. I'm waiting for some proofs, and I have finished the first run of Much Ado About Nothing.